Okay, this is going to be a very fun segment right here. We're going to discuss all the shots that we did with Jake on his bicycle. And some of them we did from a car where we were leading him or chasing him or, to his side with a camera mounted on top of a jib. And some of the shots, like this one right here, are the ones where the camera was mounted on a tripod, and the tripod is on the side of the street on the sidewalk, and we essentially allowed Jake to come into the shot, whether from left to right or from right to left, or across the camera's perspective in some way, whether going away from the camera or coming close to it. We're going to discuss all the different emotional impacts of having your subject cross in the frame, either from left to right or away from the camera or towards the camera or towards the top right-hand side or the top left-hand side or the bottom right-hand side. This is going to go hand in hand with everything that we learned back in the production DVD about the axes of movement in the frame of the subject. So here we're watching the assembly of the jib. This is a Cobra crane jib. It's a very compact jib, and it assembles very easily in about 20 minutes or so. And there's Evan Grant, our DP, and Dave, our key grip for the day, and they're setting it up in the back of Evan's SUV right there. This is definitely one of those things where you really don't want to do it if you're not confident in how to assemble things on vehicles. It is not something that's easy to do. It's not something that's necessarily safe unless you know exactly what you're doing. So by all means, please check all your applicable local laws about whether you're allowed to have something sticking out of the back of a vehicle like this. If it's legal or if it's not legal, I would consult with your police department. And I would also have a professional show you how to do it the first time. What they're doing right there is they're ratcheting the back flap of the SUV so it stays in an open position when they're driving and it doesn't close in and of itself. Here they're taking the Cobra crane out of its bag, and you have to assemble the Cobra crane. It's two pieces, and you put them together and you get one long piece that's about 10 feet long. And here's the DP tightening the head of the Cobra crane that allows the camera to tilt up and down. That's the base of the crane, and that sits on the apple box, that's wooden apple box. Then he tightens up that middle section right there, which connects to the base. And he's testing the tilting action right there of the crane itself. So you can tilt the crane, and then you can also tilt the camera up and down. And that's the two wonderful movements that you're going to see them actually illustrated side by side. And he actually bent the crane on his last shoot, but the crane is so rugged it allowed the piece to go through anyhow, so that we can assemble the whole thing. There's the cable that keeps the camera straight up and down when it's being tilted up and down. And as you can see, there's the lashing for safety that lashes the entire assembly to the frame of the vehicle. There's how the DP sits right there. And he's got a 17-inch Panasonic monitor there on the front. And there's all the weights that counterbalance the camera, so that it's effortless to tilt it up and down. And he also always adds more weight than is necessary, so that it always leans backwards rather than leans forward, the entire frame. There's the 17-inch Panasonic again with all of the frame guides, so he knows where his frame is. And he's got the zoom controller right there on his left hand, so he can zoom in and zoom out. And there's the dual action of the crane, where the head is actually being tilted down so that the camera tilts down, whereas the crane is being tilted up, and you get a really nice movement, and I'll point it out to you when he actually does it. So as you can see, we're taking off here, and there goes the car, and that's what it looks like kind of from a distance right there. So you definitely, like I said, you definitely want to check with your DMV, make sure that it's legal for you to be doing this, or whoever manages your road safety in your local area. And there's Evan actually doing all the jibbing from inside the vehicle and watching the LCD at the same time. He's got his right hand on the weights. That's what he uses to tilt the jib up and down, and he's got his left hand on the actual tripod handle so that he can actually tilt the camera by itself. And so he's getting really low to the ground right there. He's probably only about maybe a foot off the ground right there. And you can see that because, and here he is zooming right there. He zooms in and out. And I'll also point out all the zoom shots. There is a zoom right there. And we've also learned on previous segments, that zooms are definitely something that takes you out of the element of suspended disbelief, and you want to be very, very careful when you use zooms. He mainly has a zoom controller on there just to change the focal length of the camera, to change from a wide angle to a medium shot to a telephoto. It is not on there so he can do a lot of, zooming back and forth. He mainly just needs it so that he doesn't have to step towards the camera every single time to change the focal length. There's a really neat shot. Whenever you have any kind of trees or anything in the background like this, it creates a repeating pattern that makes it feel like you're moving even faster than you really are. As you can see, we're going into a road here that has a lot of potholes in it, and kind of it's a lot of imperfections in the road, and therefore the entire image is jumping up and down a little bit. There's Jake having some fun with the bike there, giving us a lot of different material to work with later on in post. And there's one where he wanted to do it really fast, and so we kind of kept up with him. That right there is a tilt up with the jib and a tilt down with the camera. So in stark contrast with, for instance, if you're doing a tripod shot, you really can't kind of stick with the performer the entire way. It has its own facets, but it's nothing like when you're actually moving with the person and they're kind of approaching you. It's a very cinematic type of approach to filmmaking, when you can actually mount a camera on a vehicle and follow or lead in front of an actor who's doing something like this, because you maintain him as the exact same size in the frame all the time. He's not passing through your frame as when you're on a tripod on the side of the road. You're with him the entire time. He's the exact same size. The audience can concentrate on just his facial reactions and his body movements rather than on his motion in the shot. And as you can see, the ride gets really bumpy the faster you go. So the more you can keep it down to like about a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, the more you're going to get better results. And also, we're going to show you a little trick on how to get even better results here in just a second. There's our DP letting some air out of his tires, and this is definitely not something you want to do on occasion, because it is dangerous, to let too much air out of your tires. In his particular case, he's letting enough air out of his tires so that it comes down to 20 psi, which is good for his vehicle. Now, that doesn't mean that's going to be good for your vehicle, but he's coming down from 28 down to 20 psi for all the tires. And that was our DP's idea, to soften the ride and to make it a little bit more cushioned against all the bumps and all the potholes that are in the road. And it worked really well, as you'll see. Again, this is something you want to be very careful with. You don't want to forget to put the air back in your tires when you're done doing your shot, because it's not something that's safe. I mean, you want to always maintain proper tire pressure in your vehicle at all times. Also, check with your manufacturer of your car before you do anything like this. Make sure that it's safe for you to do that. Check with your police department, check with your DMV that it's legal for you to be doing this before you attempt anything like what we're showing you right here. Okay, and so here he is actually jibbing down and tilting up. Watch this. He's actually jibbing the camera down right now and tilting up. So when you tilt up with the camera as you jib down, you maintain the exact same perspective on the actor. You don't change the perspective or his size in the frame or the headroom. All you're doing is you're just changing the height of the camera, but it stays looking straight forward. Okay, and here's another shot where Jake comes in from the left side. It's really neat when you can get your actor to come into the frame and then out of the frame again for all these shots. Under no circumstance do you want, on most given shots, to just have the actor appear in the frame and then when you cut in post to cut out of the frame. You always want to make sure on most of your shots that you allow the actor to come into the frame from nothing, from either left or right, come into the frame, be in the frame, and then get out of the frame again. That way you can choose to use either the middle part of it or the entire scene without having to cut. And here we did a little bit of a pan at the same time. And now we're getting really low here. This is about a foot off the ground. And we're allowing him to be very close. Just a second ago, we're allowing him to be really close to the edge, the left edge of the frame. And now he's centered. And as you can see, this is a really nice shot because this is about 6 feet up. This is about as high up as the crane will go. And you can really see the road going into the distance. It's really neat. And we allowed him to come really close to the camera right there. And these are some side shots that we did. Evan just went ahead and turned the camera to the left side on the jib and then got back in the car so that he can shoot all these side shots. These are the most wonderful shots that you can get. As nice as the leading shots are, where you can see him kind of coming right up to the camera, the side shots are the best because you can really see the scenery around him very much. You can see the houses, the types of cars in the neighborhood where he lives or that he's driving through. You can also see his facial expressions really well because you can get even closer to him with the camera. And you can also see the vehicle, or the bicycle or the motorcycle that he'll be riding. Here's some really interesting shots, that you can do with the jib, from starting low and jibbing up, and then starting high. And then jibbing down like that. You can do wide shots like this, again jibbing up. And you can do some really interesting stuff like this, where you start with them, jib down, and then watch them go off into the distance. That was one of our favorite shots. We used that in the movie. And here's some Dutch angle. We learned about Dutch angles earlier, when you can't or roll the the camera to the left or to the right, so you can get kind of like an off-axis perspective. And that's a Dutch angle right there, where it feels like he's traveling up into the left-hand side of the frame. It makes the audience kind of want to, tilt their heads to the left a little bit and try to keep up with him. Here's some slow motion stuff. This is done at 48 frames per second, which is essentially 50% speed. It's overcranked. When you overcrank the camera, you're rolling it at a higher frame rate than it normally would run at. So normally this camera would run at 24 frames per second. We're running it at 48 frames per second, so that when you play it back at 24 frames per second, it runs at half speed. The beauty of doing that in the camera, as opposed to in post, is that you get all the frames, whereas in post, when you actually change it to half speed, you're actually interpolating those frames, and it doesn't look as genuine as nice as when you're doing it in the camera.
We did this same thing, but we didn't have the crane. We just stuck a camera in the back with a tripod, and that worked really great. And I wanted to get into doing more automotive stuff, and I needed to compete with guys who could rent shot makers and do that kind of stuff, which I can't do. I don't have that kind of money. So I looked one day into the back when we were fooling around with trying to maybe mount the camera just to the hi-hat, just for the purposes of doing the same thing that we did with the tripod, with have a little bit more room back here. And I looked at it and I was like, I wonder.
Oh yeah, the utensils. This is what happens when the guys getting the food forget the forks.
We didn't forget them.
Okay, so now let's talk about directions of travel and axes of movement. As you can see here, the bicycle is moving from the right-hand side of the frame to the left-hand side. And now Jake is going to turn around, and he's going to eventually come back, and he's going to go from the left to the right. Even on a shot like this, where you have a lot of depth, the audience perceives movement as being from left to right because of the camera. We can't see in 3 dimensions. The best way to kind of visualize that is to watch this shot again in extreme slow motion, frame by frame, and in black and white. Then you can really see kind of as the bicycle and the rider becomes just an object moving from the right side of the frame to the left side of the frame. In a Western society, most of us have been born and raised reading from left to right. And so left to right becomes the direction of the reading eye. The antagonist always comes in from the right to the left. That's not necessarily set in stone. You don't have to follow that. But usually you can influence the audience's subliminal perception by having your antagonist come in from right to left. That's the bad guy. And having your hero, or the good guy, coming in from the left to the right. And that's with the grain, with the reading eye. This is an object just going directly from left to right. It's going in the correct direction. So here we go. Let's watch this one going against the grain now. So if you're trying to show someone going to do something uncomfortable, something that is not a happy occasion for them, let's say in this case for Jake, it's work, you can show them always going towards the left side of the frame as they're going to work, as we did in the movie. And when they're coming home, which is more of a happy occasion, you can show them going from left to right, which is more of kind of like a nicer, easier on the eye, going with the reading eye type of direction of movement. So now that we've gone over the x-axis, which is the left to right and right to left movement, we're going to go over the z-axis, which is the away from the camera and towards the camera kind of movement. It goes deep into the frame and then back into towards the camera. Really what's happening when an object is traveling away from the camera, it feels like it's going away from the camera because in this case we have nice lighting from the sun, which is like really nice side lights. You get a sense of depth and perspective. But really all that's happening in that object is just getting smaller in the frame. And when we're watching Jake coming back towards the camera here, we're noticing that essentially all he's doing is he's getting larger in the frame. True, he's getting closer to the camera, but if we were to look at him as just a two-dimensional object instead of a three-dimensional person, all it is just like a rectangle getting bigger and bigger and bigger in the frame and going from the right to the left. So when something grows in the frame, it is traveling in the z-axis, and when it shrinks also, it's traveling the z-axis just away from the camera. The y-axis is the up and down movement. So we explored the x-axis, left to right, the z-axis forward and away from the camera, and then closer to the camera, and then the y-axis, which is up and down. Now in this particular shot, Jake is traveling downwards from the top right-hand side of the frame to the bottom left-hand side of the frame. And that feels different emotionally than this shot, where he's traveling from the top left-hand side of the frame to the bottom right-hand side of the frame. Not only is he traveling with the reading eye from the top left to the bottom right, but he's also traveling downwards. So it's really easy on the eye. It's the easiest motion on the eye to do is to go from the top left-hand side to the bottom right-hand side. You can show him heading from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. And that could just be walking down a hallway, it could be riding a bike, it could be driving a car. And anyway, it's just movement across the frame. It is still easier on the eye to move up and to the right than to move up and to the left. Again, this is with our reading eyes as a Western society. The movement in this frame of the object is going from the bottom left-hand side, bottom left-hand corner, to the top right-hand side. That is still easier on the eye than anything moving from the right to the left. He is laboring up a hill, but it could just be a car traveling upwards where the person inside the car obviously is not laboring to get up anywhere. The car is just doing all the work, the engine is doing the work. But you kind of have to liken it visually to a person laboring up a hill going from the bottom left-hand side to the top right-hand side. So it's still easier than anything going from the bottom right-hand side up to the top left-hand side like this shot. That is the hardest movement for the eye to follow visually. So you want to reserve those shots for anything where the character is heading towards something absolutely inevitably kind of bad or a very difficult or trying experience. So now that we know all about directions of travel, let's watch some of these shots. Look at this shot. There's a lot of empty space in the foreground there. Watch what happens when we move to the next shot and we get the bike closer to the camera. There's just a lot more action traveling in front of the camera. It's a more interesting shot. And here he's traveling in the other direction, but closer to the camera this time, so it kind of occupies that foreground space. Now here we're going to be inserting a 0.9 graduated ND filter to knock down that sky's intensity. The sky up there is way too bright. We're going to show it again here, just to kind of show you exactly what we did again. You can see that sky in the house kind of get a little bit dimmer, but at the same time the road remains the same exposure. Does not affect his exposure because he's mainly occupying the area like the road. And as you can see when he travels up, you don't see the effect of the ND filter on him or his face, only on the sky in the house. And here's a 1.2 ND filter, ND graduated filter. And here he is performing the same movement with the ND graduated 1.2 in the matte box. And here he's traveling back up. And now we're going to try different heights of the tripod. This is about a knee height. And here he is traveling from right to left. Tripod at about knee height. And look at the change in perspective in the street when we switch to about waist height. You can see more of the street, more of the depth of the street, but not necessarily the surface. And here's 6 feet up. This is about eye level when you're standing up. So it's above his head. Okay, and here we are showing, we're kind of waving our hands there to kind of show exactly where the camera is and the fact that you cannot pan beyond a certain point or else you're going to see the camera in the shot. You have to always be aware of your camera shadow. Now here's a tracking shot. We're tracking him from the right-hand side to the left-hand side. And now we're going to track him here in just a second from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So we're tracking on a medium shot with the movement. This is in stark contrast to all the static shots we just showed you just a second ago, where we just park the camera and we don't really move it. This is a static shot. There's no movement in the camera. The object just goes through the frame. And here's another tracking shot where we lose the focus in the middle. They're really hard to keep the focus unless you have somebody doing the focus for you. Watch the focus getting lost here. Gone right there. This is again going to track a little bit with the movement on the way up, but eventually it settles at a static shot. And here's another one where you're tracking continuously on a wide shot. See, we're keeping him in the exact same part of the frame the entire time, all the way down until we can't do that anymore, and he just passes through. Here's a right to left handheld, not on a tripod. You can see it's a little bit more shaky, but it's easier to track and keep him centered. And here's one of my favorites. This is the one where the palm trees are in the background, and they create kind of this really nice row of vertical objects that kind of track his movement. And here he is coming back in the other direction. And you can see that when you have a telephoto lens like this, the car feels like it was almost going to hit him. And when you have a telephoto lens, it forces the perspective, which means that it feels that the object is just taking forever to get to the lens, and you don't get a sense of three-dimensional perspective anymore. The car and the bicycle, they're about at the exact same horizontal plane, like they could impact each other. That's when you see all those movies, where the guy's running away from the truck and the truck is right behind him and it's about to run him over. Well, that truck's probably 50 feet, 100 feet behind him, and you could never tell because the lens has been zoomed in so far. It's a very deep telephoto lens, and you don't get a sense of perspective. You don't really know just how far that truck is behind him. Whereas with a wide-angle lens, you really get a sense of perspective. You know exactly the distances between the two objects. Let's say that car back there and him. I mean, the car just feels like it's 300 feet back there. And it really is. Not like the other shot, the telephoto shot, where it just feels like it was right behind him. I mean, it really wasn't. Even when he had passed it and he was about 20 feet away from it, it still felt like they were in about the same horizontal plane. You can really have fun with that. You can really play with perspective and just watch for shots like that in movies, and you'll notice that directors use that device a lot. They use perspective a lot because it's just one of those built-in camera techniques that you don't need any special effects for. I mean, you can build tension right there in the lens. It's a beautiful thing. Okay, so now we're going to go over the accident scene. Here's the first shot when he's pedaling up the mountain. Here comes the SUV about to run him over, flashing its lights. He finally notices it, runs off the road, does a flip, and lands on the ground, goes unconscious for a little bit, gets up, picks up his bike, and he hobbles with what's left of his dignity back to his apartment. Okay, so this is the first shot when we were testing the speed of the vehicle against the speed of the bike. And also, Jake was talking to us here to let us know essentially what is the correct speed, and we're communicating back with him. There's a zoom, and there's where he runs off the road. That's probably the first time you guys have seen that, actually. That's that area over there to the left side. That's one of the reasons why I picked this location, is because there was this little nook that he could kind of duck out there, and it would look like he's running off the road, but he was actually just kind of going up this little embankment. Let's look at the shot again. The reason that I picked this location is not just because of that little nook that he could duck into, but it was because this road is this wonderful road that kind of comes in from the left there, winds out and comes up straight into the camera, which kind of, as we learned from the production DVD, it's one of those things that leads your eye off into the distance. And anything that does that is going to make a more interesting frame that people will enjoy looking at more than something, let's just say, like this, which is not very dramatic and is not appropriate for the situation. And we like the idea of the golf cart running parallel up the mountain at the same speed as Jake. There's one, and there's one also right behind it. We didn't feel like it took the attention away from Jake. It just felt like it was a lived-in environment where there's people up there. And it also definitely did not take any attention away, because within a moment, Jake is all the way up the mountain, and he's, right up in front of the camera. Dominates the entire frame. Here's the first take that we did. This is the first take that we did, and it was kind of about a medium telephoto. And he comes right up to the camera. Looks like a really nice shot. And he reacts and goes off frame. And here's the second take, the one that we ended up using in the movie. Comes up to the camera. It's about the same kind of thing. And then he reacts and goes off the camera. Now, watch the differences in the reactions from the first shot and in the second shot. Let's watch that one more time, frame by frame. Here's the first shot. And you notice he was already looking up the hill, and he reacted kind of as he was looking up the hill. It wasn't as genuine as the second shot, frame by frame, When you see him, he's just staring up, and then all of a sudden his entire body reacts to the SUV being there. And that's definitely a major argument for having a large monitor on the set. You can see those intricate responses that the actors will give you that you just can't see on the little LCD that's built inside of the camera. And if you don't have the luxury of having a large monitor on the set, you really want to shoot more takes because sometimes you don't notice these things until you get back into the post-production suite and you notice it and you're like, wow, I really wish I shot another take because this just isn't good. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel right. For example, here's a couple more shots that we did where we put the lens in a wide angle position. Here's his reaction. I mean, it's just so far away you can't really see, and as opposed to the medium shot right here where he's right up against the camera and he reacts and bam, done. Like I said before, as an independent filmmaker, most of your time should be spent on medium shots and close-ups. That's where you're going to sell the story and the script to your audience and the action. When you have a lot more money and you have a lot more time, then you can hire larger crews and really dress up a scene, make sure that you're in total control and have a stuntman and do great wide shots. But for most exteriors, when you're an independent filmmaker on a shoestring budget, you want to concentrate on medium shots and close-ups. Okay, and here's the teardown of the Cobra crane. We tore it down after we got done filming all the driving shots following the bicycle, and we were preparing it to act as a part of the movie now. And there's Dave, and he's tearing it down right there. He's holding it underneath his arm to balance the weights on the back right there until he's done disattaching all the cabling on the front. And here he is actually taking the weights off with his left hand on the front of the Cobra crane, also to counterbalance the frame of it. And once he removes those, then he can take apart the whole thing and remove it from the base, the pedestal as we see it. And he sets it down, and he disengages the cable that keeps it level. That's that white cable right there that the DP is disengaging and rolling right now. And then they tear apart the whole thing back into the two pieces, and they put it back in the bag when they're done. And herein begins a long string of reverse angles that we did to try to get just the right truck shot where it feels like the truck is coming down the mountain, is really about to hit him. And it took us quite a while to really coordinate the path of the truck and the path of Jake on the bicycle. And when the truck comes around the corner and when Jake comes into the frame, and how we're going to coordinate this whole thing. And the reason I'm showing you every single take exactly as we shot it is to show you the sequence that usually you have to go through in order to finally get a decent shot, and how after you get a decent shot sometimes you end up getting a string of bad shots. So I'm going to show you all the raw footage, and also to tell you that the best way that we ended up figuring out for coordinating the whole thing was using cell phones, so that there's a cell phone inside the truck, and we've got another person watching over the top left-hand side of the road to see when the truck's just about to come around the corner, and having the DP coordinate with Jake when he's gonna kind of set him off on his path and tell him to go ahead, and me filming with the camera because I had a certain idea in my mind of exactly the way I wanted to do it. And so we finally got it done. So here's all the footage. Here's the first one. We obviously didn't get anything. We just got the truck flashing its lights down there because we couldn't coordinate the action properly. Here again, we're just kind of waiting for the truck. Here it comes, and here comes Jake, and he's off to the right. Here's another one where all we get is just Jake, no truck. And bam, there comes Jake, and it's nice. I put a little bit of, I was shooting this one myself, and I put a little bit of a jarring motion into the pan, kind of like a back and forth motion to increase the tension and build the momentum of the moment. And here's another shot where the truck comes down the hill, flashing its lights. That was terrible, of course, because it was a wide shot. We don't have the money for wide shots. We should concentrate on medium shots. That's what sells it to the audience. It sells the tension and the drama. Wide shot looks terrible. It just, he did a great job on his action. Jake did. I mean, he did a great job pulling it off, but it just, you saw almost too much in the wide shot. It just didn't feel intense. It didn't feel genuine like the one that was a medium shot, and it was more of a telephoto approach to it rather than a wide angle. Use wide shots to establish a scene, but once you've done that, for a few seconds, go ahead and cut to the medium shots and begin your storytelling. I do want to encourage you that when you're filming, when you're shooting, always protect everybody who's on the set, protect the performers and the crew and everybody who's involved in your project. Really no shot is ever worth someone's getting hurt about it. There's professional stunt people paid to take risks, And even when they take risks, they're very calculated risks that are, they have all the experience in the world and all the safety equipment around them just designed for that particular purpose. So for you to, on an independent production, to risk anyone's safety or anyone's life is just unacceptable. And it doesn't really lead to anything in the end. The shot is just not worth anyone getting hurt over it. You can usually get the same kind of intensity, just like we did over here, without really, putting anyone in harm's way in any way, shape, or form. It was just the truck was going 20 miles per hour. The bicycle was on the right side. He missed him by a mile. I mean, they were probably 20 feet apart. But it just, by using perspective and angles and the correct telephoto lens, we made it look as if they were very close. As we showed you guys before, when we were forcing the perspective with the telephoto lens, and it felt like the car was just about to hit Jake when he was, traversing in front of it. Those in-camera effects are usually the best ones, and you can get by a lot by using those. Okay, so this is going to be a section on map reading, compass reading, and figuring out exactly where the sun is going to come out and which direction it's going to come from and at what height at what time of day. And then we downloaded from the internet, which is a free download, a set of numbers that show us the time on the left side, 6:50 a.m., 7 a.m., 7:10 a.m., and then it gives us the altitude of the sun in -2.7, -0.8, 1.4 in respect to the horizon. The horizon being 0, and anything that's below 0 means that the sun is still below the horizon. Anything that's above 0 means that it's peaking over the horizon. And that's, of course, at sea level for Los Angeles, that our actual zip code. And then we also look at one more set of numbers on the right side, and that's the degrees in azimuth on the compass reading that it should read of where the sun is going to come out of. So 116.6 degrees, 118 degrees, 119.4 degrees, etc., etc. So we notice that at 7:10 a.m. at 118 degrees, the sun is going to be at 1.4 above sea level. So that's pretty much when sunrise is going to happen. Now, of course, it might be behind a mountain, which means it's going to take a lot longer, maybe up to 7:30 or 7:40 for it to actually peek over the mountain for us to actually see it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a compass reading and figure out exactly where 118 degrees is. So we look at our compass, and we're going to do a freeze frame here in just a moment. And we count up until we see 90 degrees, 120 degrees, and a couple of dots or a couple of dashes before 120 degrees is going to be 118 degrees. So it's due about between east and south. We're closer to east, of course. So right at that direction, that's where the sun is going to come out of. Now, of course, since we're in the northern hemisphere, United States, it's always going to be coming out kind of southern part of the eastern side, and it's going to roll towards the south and set in the west. Sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and again, because we're in the northern hemisphere, it always leans towards the south, and it makes a circle around the south down to the west. If we were in the southern hemisphere, it would go towards the north. It would go east and then north and then west. Northern hemisphere, United States, is going to go east, south, west. So let's go ahead and see what it's going to look like at that time. This is at about 6:50, 7 a.m. or so. Not much to speak of. Can't really shoot under this light, but you can already see it. I mean, it's actually coming up somewhere down there over the horizon. It's somewhere down there, and you can see it kind of rising. We did a little bit of a time lapse there to kind of show you what it's starting to look like. Since we're doing a city shot, we can't really see much of the city at this point. We want to actually shoot all of our filter tests at this point, and we really can't see much of the city to do filter testing right now. So based on our locale and our time of day and our weather conditions, it might be different for different cities around the country. But this is what the city's starting to look like around 7:40 or 7:45. Now, even further down, maybe about 8 o'clock or so, this is what we're starting to see. It's really starting to peak up over the horizon. In fact, it's finally starting to blow out our camera around 9 a.m., and we're getting about an f2.8 reading at ISO 400 at 1/30 shutter speed, which is close to where we're shooting at. We're shooting at 24. Our meter will not go to 24 frames per second, and so we're just getting a shutter speed close to it. And we're of course using our incident meter, like we learned in the production DVD, to measure the light and figure out exactly what kind of light we've got. So we don't have to keep taking the camera out every single time to see if we have enough light to shoot. We can just kind of leave the camera in the car until it's actually time to actually shoot. And we take another compass reading to make sure that we were correct. And yes, we were correct. At about 7:40 a.m., it was 122 degrees, and it was 6.5 over the horizon, which is we actually started filming around 8 a.m., which was perfectly appropriate for us. It allowed us to get the crew there on time and everybody there. We didn't have to ask them to come in at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. or 9 a.m. when it's too late to get those really, really nice sunrise shots. Okay, welcome to the section where we're going to discuss filtration. And the best way to get to filtration is by first talking about matte boxes and French flags. And the French flag is the device that sits on top of the matte box, as you can see on the top left-hand side, and it allows you to block the light that would normally hit the lens if the sun or some other light source were directly in front of the camera. It is that particular flag that goes up on the top, kind of like the barn door of a light, and you adjust it up and down, and it allows you to block the light from the lens. And also the side flags are the ones on the sides and allow you to block the side light. The other thing we're going to look at is the usage of jibs, and we've used the jib extensively before in some of the other things we've discussed, and we're also going to use it here. It's the simple Cobra crane jib, very low cost, affordable jib that performs some really nice moves. As you can see there, it is doing a jib up and tilt down, which means that the whole jib is going up, whereas the camera is still tilting forward to maintain the same aspect. And we're going to show you what that looks like. And here you see it from another angle. As you can see, it is jibbing down, but the camera is maintaining a tilt up position, which means it's staying straight forward while the jib is tilting down. The first thing we're going to start with is the usage of French flags and matte boxes. As you can see, that's what the matte box is doing right there. As you tilt up with the matte box, you'll see that there's a flare in the center of the screen that starts really early on because the French flag was tilted way up and it's out of the frame. However, when we lower the French flag, you can see the shadow that it creates across the lens, and then it allows you to tilt up much further before you see that same flare start to appear in the frame. So what the French flag is going to do is going to guard your lens against stray light. Usually it's from the sun or from some other source. So here again is the French flag in the down position or the active position. The French flag is being used there to shelter the lens and shelter the matte box from the sunlight, which the sun is directly in front of the camera. And here it is when you withdrawn or up position, it is not active, it is not shielding the lens from the sunlight. And again, this is where you would have your frame at. This is how far you can tilt up if you have the French flag in the active position or the down position. And here's how far you can tilt up if you do not engage the French flag, and if it is not in the active position and is not sheltering you from the sun. So here's how much more you can tilt up if you engage the French flag or put it in a down or active position. Okay, now we're going to do one more example of reducing flare by using the French flag. As you can see, there's a lot of flare here in the lens because we're shooting directly into the sun. Now, I want to shoot directly into the sun because that's how I get all those really nice highlights in a road. And also notice all those really nice highlights in the trees as well too, and in the house. It's a really nice shot when you shoot directly into the sun, but I don't want that flare. So I'm going to try to use the French flag. I'm going to keep putting it up and down in the down and up position, trying to eliminate the flare. Okay, and that is going to be the best that I can do at this height. So there's still a lot of flare in the lens, and the reason being is that we are too low with the camera on the tripod. So if we were to, for instance, go up in height, as we just did right there, we went up about 3 feet in height. We don't have to quite tilt up so far in order to get the same shot. So now when we try to eliminate the flare with the French flag, here it goes. Bam, done. No flare anymore, and I still got the shot that I want. Not a single bit of flare in the frame. Okay, now we're going to start going into all the individual filters. The first thing we're going to do is talk about the 0.3 soft edge neutral density filter. So here's the filter. I'm holding it in my hand. It's a 4x4 filter, and there's the designation on it. It says ND neutral density, 0.3, that's one stop, SE for soft edge. So ND, neutral density, that means that it is not affecting the color in any way on the frame. It means it goes in, it's just a neutral gray. You'll see the color get affected seemingly, but that's only because it's darkening the frame, which makes the color seem richer or deeper. But it's not actually adding or subtracting any color from the frame. It's just a pure gray, no color is being added or subtracted. 0.3 means one stop. That means it's going to half the light. It's going to half the amount of light that is hitting that filter from actually penetrating it and going into the lens. And as you can see, it's graduated, which means it's darker at the top and it's lighter at the bottom. It's actually clear at the bottom and it gets gradually lighter as you go into the bottom. That's what's called a soft edge. Now if it was a hard edge, it would just be a straight hard line across the center. But because it's a soft edge for SE, that means it gradually decreases in intensity until it becomes pure clear. The most important thing to remember about that is that at the top is where the 0.3 is, which means it's actually taking the light down by a whole half. That means that at the top of the frame, the lens will get 50% less light. It may seem like it's a lot, but it's really not a lot. And we're going to demonstrate to you in just a minute here how it's not a lot when you're dealing with the sky, because the sky is just so much brighter than the ground usually. And you need usually a 0.9, which is a 3-stop filter, which decreases the light by 8 times. Not just 2 times, but 8 times, in order to usually get the sky to balance with the ground very well. So let's go ahead and watch some examples and try to learn about exactly how that works. So here we are dropping the 0.3 SE ND into the lens, and we're going to pan directly. So you saw it right at the beginning. We actually dropped it in, and now we're panning. So what does it mean for us to be able to pan with a graduated SE filter on there? It means that we can drop in a graduated ND soft edge filter, and we can still perform a move with the tripod. There's kind of a myth that once you get a soft edge neutral density filter into the lens, you're kind of stuck with the frame as it is and you have to stay with a static shot. That's not true. You can pan, you just can't tilt, and I'll show you how that works. Now here's the ND 0.6 soft edge. This is a 2-stop filter, and as you can see right there, that's how much it darkens the frame. We're going to drop it in and out. And you're free to rewind this back and forth as much as you want and kind of look at it again if you want to. And here we are performing a pan as well. Same thing with the 0.6. And as you can see, it really darkens the frame a lot more. Now here's the 0.9. That's really dark. That's 3 stops, which is 8 times less light. And here we are dropping it in and also performing the pan the exact same way. Now here we are, we're going to go ahead and drop it in the middle of a frame. This is a zoomed in shot. This is a 0.9 going in and out. We're going to drop it in, and then we're going to go ahead and pull out. We're going to zoom out and zoom in. And you really can't tell that it's there. It just kind of looks like the top of the frame is darker. Looks like there's a little bit of a light mist above the buildings there. But you really can't tell it's in there. The reason being is I didn't tilt. You can zoom in, zoom out. The only thing you cannot do is tilt. You can zoom in, zoom out, pan, no tilt. And as long as you don't tilt, you're not going to give away the effect. Okay, now here we have an ND 0.3. Notice that there's no SE designation at the end of it, which means there's no soft edge graduation inside the filter. It's just a solid neutral density filter that takes out one whole stop of light. We're going to go ahead and tier that with a ND 0.9 soft edge, which is the one we just learned about, that has the graduation in the middle. So the 0.3 is already in there right now, and now we're going to go ahead and add the 0.9 soft edge. And as you can see, it effectively knocks down all that excess glare that's in the top of the frame, and it balances it with the ground very, very well. And we have a very nice frame now. I mean, this is very shootable. We don't have to go ahead and overexpose the ground in order to compensate for the sky. Now here's a solid ND 0.6 and an ND 0.9 soft edge. Here's the frame without the filter, and here's the ND 0.9 soft edge going in, and it balances the frame also very well. Here's an ND 0.9 solid, and we're going to go ahead and drop this into the frame and watch the change in the depth of field. I mean, wow, look at the buildings in the background. You really can't even see them anymore. Let's go back to the original shot right there, and you can see everything is in focus. You can distinguish all the buildings, all the shapes, and the tree branches in the foreground kind of blend into the background. They don't really stand out any one bit. Now watch this. Now they really stand out. We add a little bit of exposure, we add a little bit of a tint, and also the background is so completely out of focus now that you can still tell what it is, but you can really draw attention to the tree branches now if you really wanted to do that. Here's another depth of field test. You can see that the guardrail and the wood in the foreground is very much in focus, and so is the house sitting at the top of the mountain in the background. Well, let's just say you wanted to isolate the house and separate it from that guardrail. Use a 0.3. We're going to drop that in and open up the iris. And that doesn't really create any separation. Let's try the 0.6. That's 2 stops less light. We're going to open up the iris. And it creates a little bit of separation, but just not enough. Now let's try the 0.9 solid. And here we go. We're going to drop in the 0.9. So we're going to open up the iris 3 stops. This is almost wide open. So we're at f1.8 right now. And here we go. We got the guardrail out of focus, and the house is in focus. We're going to zoom back out, and we've got a great frame now. We finally were able to knock that guardrail out of focus. Now here's a 0.9. And we're going to also add a 0.9 soft edge. And here's the 0.9 soft edge going in. We're going to rotate it to the left just to knock down that sky. That sky is way above 100 IREs. So if we were to drop it in and rotate it so we can just knock out just that sky, kind of like a diagonal, then we can get that sky down below 100 IREs. And we have an even nicer frame. Now let's just say we wanted to shoot directly into the sun without harming the CCD in the camera or harming our eyes in any way. We're going to drop in a 0.9 and a 0.6 and another 0.9. And this is the effect that we're going to have when we drop in all those 3 filters. We're going to have a very bright little orb in the distance, a little bit of flare from it, but nothing is knocked out. The sky is definitely not out of acceptable norms. So on a waveform monitor, the sun is going to be pure white, but everything around it is going to be very well within norms, very well within under 100 IREs. Okay, let's review all the soft edges one last time. Here's the 0.3, and there's the 0.6, and there's the 0.9 soft edge. Okay, I got one last filter test for you guys. This is an extreme situation where you're shooting practically directly into the sun as it is setting at sunset. You can see it's off to the right-hand side right there, and is extremely bright in the horizon. It's very bright. It's probably about 8 to 10 times brighter than the ground right there. So it's completely blown out. It's way above 100 IRE acceptable levels. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and try to knock that down. This is a 0.3 solid. So by itself, it doesn't really do very much at all. With the addition of the 0.6 soft edge. So 0.3 is already in there. We're going to add the 0.6 soft edge right now. And you can see it brings down the sun a little bit. It doesn't bring it down a lot, but it brings it down a little bit. It's still above 100 IREs though, so we need to bring it down again. Here's a 0.3 plus the 0.9 soft edge now. 0.3 is already in the lens. Here comes the 0.9. And boy, that really knocks it down. Now the sun, well, first of all, it feels yellow and orange now instead of just plain old white. And also it has come down below 100 IREs. So it's not going to blow out if somebody's watching an NTSC monitor. It is not going to go ahead and read white. It's going to read yellow and orange. And now the sky is visible, and also the ground is still visible. So you've got everything. The entire frame is sculpted. Now this is not something that you can duplicate in post. You have to do it in the lens at the time. If you try to do it in post, I'll show you exactly what it's going to look like. Here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and try to bring down the gamma and the highlights in post, and here's the frame. Doesn't look very good, and also what was blown out white is gone. It's not going to come back. Here's the frame that we shot in the field. I'm going to keep cutting back and forth so you can see the frame that we shot in the field with the filters as opposed to what we did in post. Here's the post. And here's the frame that we shot in the field. You can really see a major difference. I mean, in the grass and the trees and the sky. It just looks so lackluster. I mean, this is awful. It's not something that I would want to put in the movie unless I was going for effect. But look at this. The grass is nice and saturated. The sky has a lot of dynamic range from the lightest to the darkest. It's just a really nice frame. Try to use filters in the field. I mean, if you're shooting a landscape like this and you have the filters already, go ahead and try to use them because it's really going to get you a much nicer frame in post. Okay, now that we're done with the neutral density filters, let's talk about the true pole or the polarizer filter. This is a circular polarizer filter. It is also a 4x4, and we're going to go ahead and talk about what the polarizer does. What it does primarily is it polarizes the light that is hitting it, and it only allows certain wavelengths of light to enter into the lens and isolates other wavelengths. Now here's the reality of what it actually does. You can see that as I turn my hand right there, that it's actually blocking out certain parts of the sky. I'm going to do it again here. It's kind of like almost like magic. I mean, you're looking at this thing and you're looking through the lens, and it's actually darkening certain parts of the frame as you turn it. Now here it is when you actually drop it into the matte box and you start turning it. Watch this. You can see the whole, like, part of the sky changing and then getting darker and lighter, and then the other part getting lighter. I mean, it's a really bizarre, very wonderful kind of effect, but here's the real magic. This is through a car window, and boy, I'll tell you what, that's really magic. I mean, when you can do something like that, that's just incredible. So the light is coming in and hitting that car window from the side, and it's reflecting off of that, causing glare directly into the lens. And what you can do with a polarizer filter, you can drop it in and you can remove that glare entirely. You can do the same thing with water and shop windows, any glass surface or water surface that is reflecting light from the sun or any other light source back into your lens. You can drop in the polarizer, and you can just turn it a little bit, usually 90 degrees to either side, and you'll effectively knock out all of that glare, and you can see straight through the glass or the water. Okay, so now that we learned the theory, let's put it into practice. We did a scene up here on the top of a mountain, and here's our DP preparing the matte box and attaching it to the camera. There's our actors rehearsing their scene. It's a very simple scene. All it is, they're just sitting there and doing their respective art forms. He's writing, she's painting, and she just looks over and give him a nice look, essentially letting him know that she's supporting him in his venture. And there's the DP assembling the matte box. And here's the DP mounting the camera onto the jib, onto the Cobra crane. He's tightening the little lock nut in the bottom there that locks the camera in place. He is changing the weights, adding heavier weight to counterbalance the camera. And there I'm holding the Cobra crane in place until he puts it on there. And now he put in just the right amount of weight so it counterbalances it perfectly. And now he's just adjusting the matte box, making sure that everything's ready for the filters. And there's the actors. They're kind of knocked out in the sun there, getting ready for the scene. And there's the jib going up and down. And as you can see, it's jibbing up and the camera is tilting forward. That's because his left hand, the DP's left hand, is resting on that tripod handle. So while his right hand tilts the jib up, his left hand is always on the tripod handle, keeping the camera level. And here's the actual shot. And we still felt like he was a little bit too close, even though it's not a bad shot at all. But notice how towards the end it gets really difficult for the DP to judge how far down he needs to tilt, and so we cut off Jake over like near his chest there. It's just a really bad frame, but only because he really cannot see the monitor at all. And also you can see just how important it is to remove distracting objects or actually frame away from them. So here comes blocking. This is the most important thing for blocking. You see that conduit cover in the ground in the center, right in the center of the frame. And here it is where we just block the actors differently. We didn't do anything. All we did was just move them off to the left a little bit so we don't see that anymore. Let's try one more. This was one of our best ones. And you can see the final framing is so much better now. And I'm showing you all this raw footage because I want you to see how many times sometimes it takes to do a certain move before you get it right. And that's part of the principles of this whole program, is to not mask any of the struggles that we went through to get these shots, and to show you guys just exactly how many times it took for us to get a decent shot. So now that we've done some jib work, let's go ahead and do some filtration. Let's apply the principles that we just learned. So we're taking out some brand new filters here, brand new 4x4 ND graduated soft edge filters. We're putting them into the filter frame that's going to go into the matte box. He's also blowing all the lint off of there. Solid part of the frame is also pointing towards the lens. And as he's doing it, one last brush down just to make sure there's nothing left in there. So the reason we're doing this is that we're trying to control the frame. We don't want to change the exposure on the actors. We don't want to darken them anymore, but we want to bring the sky under control. We also want to have a little bit of sky in the background to get that depth, because if you don't have that sky back there, you don't feel like there's a sense of depth. On all these shots, you want to look at the top of the frame to make sure you get the effect. So now the DP pulled that filter out, he's going to go ahead and switch it up and put in a 0.6 ND. And so that's no filter, and here comes the 0.6 graduated SE. After we added the 0.6, we knocked down the sky so much that we were able to actually iris up a little bit and get more light on the actors. That's no filter, and there goes the 0.9. We're going to go iris up all the way to wide open, and we're going to start irising down slowly until we hit what is supposed to be this proper skin tones. That is the f-stop for us to have proper skin tones, but unfortunately the background is completely blown out. We can't shoot like that. But we're not going to settle for that. We're going to go ahead and try to get as close as possible to those better skin tones as we can, and that's by using an ND 1.2 soft edge. 1.2 being a 4 stops. So you got the 0.3 is 1 stop, 0.6 is 2 stops, 0.9 is 3 stops, 1.2 is 4 stops. And every time you go up, you double. So it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. ND 0.6 is 4 times less light. ND 0.9 is 8 times less light. ND 1.2 is 16 times less light. It's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That's how you do the calculation. We're starting at f6.8, and this is f4.8. Here's the ND 0.3 grad. You notice the skin tones are a little bit improved, but not much. Here's the 0.6 and improved a little bit more. Here's the 0.9, improved a lot more, but not quite enough. Now here's the 1.2, but at f6.8. This is before we made the exposure adjustment. And here's after the exposure adjustment. Major, major difference. And as you can see, the original 0.9, it was okay, but it wasn't quite a 1.2. So that's why it really helps you to have a full arsenal of these ND graduated filters at your disposal, because you don't really know what you're going to go up against. In a situation like this, if you just had the 0.3, the 0.6, and the 0.9, it just wouldn't have been enough. You really needed the 1.2 to get those really, really good skin tones. It's really nice to have those 4 filters at your disposal. 0.3, 0.6, 0.9 soft edge, and if you can afford it, a 0.3, a 0.6, a 0.9, and 1.2, as well as all of those in hard edges too. Okay, now we went ahead and also gave you the wrong position. Notice how the ND soft edge filter is cutting off the top of Jake's body. His face is completely dark because we brought the camera down to too low of a height. Whenever you're using ND soft edges, you got to get the camera up to a higher level. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting the filter, the cutoff actually in the middle of the person's body. And the only way to do that is to go ahead and raise the camera so that the background can be in the top part of the frame. Here's the wrong position again. You'll notice that because we were so far low on the ground that there was no way to isolate the sky by itself. So I want to make sure that you're up at pretty much about chest level whenever you're trying to use ND filters with people who are seated, for instance, in front of the camera, which is most of the time when you're going to end up using these ND filters, is in combination with people seated in front of the camera. Now here's a pan to the action. We're panning into the shot, but if you do a tilt, you can really see that edge line right there, traveling all the way down from the sky down to Jake. That's the edge, the soft edge of the neutral density filter, just traveling down across the sky. And so you can pan, but you cannot tilt. And just to show you guys exactly what the reflector is doing, this is a reflector in on Jake. And we're going to go ahead and take it away here in just a moment and show you what you're going to be losing if you don't have that reflector in there. And here we go, reflector's out. Okay, now on this one we're going to concentrate on where to put the reflector. Do we put it on the right side and fill in the shadow side of the person where the sun is coming from the left side? Or do we go ahead and move it to the left side of the frame and fill in everything that the camera sees from both sides of the face, the shadow side and the lighter side as well too? So let's look at the 2 different ways of doing that and which one is going to end up looking the best. So first of all, here's the move that we're going to do. We're just doing like a move where we drop the camera down. The DP is preparing the move right now, and he's going to go ahead and lower the camera, and that's the move right there. And there's the original position of the reflector. It's going to be on the right side, only filling in the right side or the shadow side of her arms and maybe her face. So here's frame right, reflector in. This is the reflector coming in only from the frame right side. Here it is again for positioning. There's the camera. Okay, you can see it very clearly now. We're going to concentrate on that for a second. And we're going to take it away. Okay, so this is what it looks like with the reflector out. This is the right side, frame right reflector is out. And we're going to go ahead and put it back in. There it is coming in. So that's reflector in. And we're going to take it away again. Not really much of a difference. It's only affecting her arm a little bit, but not her face or anything else. So we're going to try it from the left side. As you can see, the reflector is moving to the left side. So it's coming from pretty much right behind the camera, filling in all of the subject, not just the left side. So that's frame left, reflector in. And we're going to go ahead and take it away here in just a second. There it is. It's out. And back in. You can see a major difference on the left side there, on her face and her arm, everywhere. So it's always better when you're trying to bounce sunlight back into your subject and fill in shadows, to not just go on the shadow side and just bounce it in, but to actually come right behind the camera or to its left, wherever you can encompass most of the body and try to bounce light back into the entire subject as much as possible, rather than just off to the right, for instance, and opposite to the sun, and just bounce light into the shadow side. It's better to come from the camera. Look at it as a fill light. Remember from the DVD, from production DVD, how we learned that the fill light always comes from the camera. It's a large, soft source. It fills in all the shadows and all the highlights and everything, not just coming in from the right side or the shadow side, but from the camera, it fills in everything.